Greetings and salutations, my fellow humans, and welcome to episode 2 of the 2-episode season 1 premiere of Blame It on the Ish podcast. I continue to be the modern day sage. Today's episode is entitled The Trouble with Cancel Culture, featuring an interview with Dr. Phillof Shite, head of behavioral analytics and psychology at BSU. Now, before I get too deep into this, I would like to remind you all that this is an opinion, which, like assholes, everyone has one. I would also like to remind you that thankfully still in this country it is not illegal to offend people. If at some point while listening to this you become offended, remember first that you have the option to just stop listening to this podcast and never come back to it. I won't be offended by that, but I will not be apologizing for speaking honestly, truthfully, and bluntly. I will be speaking respectfully also. I'm not trying to be a dick about anything. I'm just saying what I'm saying is coming from my true self. That's the only way I know how to talk about stuff. And this is what's actually part and parcel with what this episode is all about. So, let's get a firm grasp of the obvious, which, granted, may not be so obvious for everyone. What is cancel culture? Well, in layman's terms, it's the phenomenon of publicly rejecting, boycotting, or ending support for particular people or groups because of their social or moral unacceptable views or actions. And while I was doing my research for this topic, when I looked up what is cancel culture, there was an additional line at the end of that definition that says, quote, "While cancel culture can ruin careers, it can also make a public figure think twice before posting controversial comments," end quote. And that is one of the ways cancel culture is fucked up. Yes, we should always be mindful of what we are putting into the world, but should that mindfulness really come from a place of fear? I mean, if someone is being mindful of what they are saying and doing only because they are afraid of what might happen to them, their jobs, or their loved ones if they do not, and not because it is the right thing to do, how then is that not disingenuous? How does that not have the same energy as the threat of eternal damnation if you do not do good? This is part of the hypocrisy of cancel culture. The people who believe that you should not be bullied or intimidated into conforming are in fact intimidating and bullying people into conforming. First of all, when you want to talk about cancel culture being a punishment for inappropriate behavior, then that's the punishment. The boycotting, the loss of support, that's the punishment. This constant online beratement of a person with death threats and all the talk of you should just kill yourself is not just wrong, it's extremely dangerous. I mean, it's one thing to lose support. It is another thing entirely to be threatened with the loss of your job, your home, your friends and loved ones, and even your life. And that is just appalling. I mean, if you're constantly attacking someone and telling them that they should just kill themselves because they won't ever be loved again or work again or have a normal life again, because you will personally see to it and then they do, you are responsible. Not everything that is said that you disagree with or are offended by has to be met with the swift and vengeful hand of the archangel of social justice. Least of all, that someone deserves to die. I mean, what in the hell happened to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Or it's not what you're called, it's what you answer to. Or we can go full grade school. I am rubber, you are glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. This is what older generations mean when they say that younger generations are too soft. They're saying you're too easily offended or brittle-skinned, a Mr. Glass, if you will, paper-thin. Additionally, cancel culture is not a new idea. It's been around for a very long time in the world, and it's only because of the existence of social media has it been so prevalent in modern times. Now, before we address the damaging and traumatizing effects of cancel culture, I want to take a look back at a few instances of cancel culture from our past. McCarthyism, aka the Second Red Scare. Now, according to the American Heritage Dictionary, it is defined as the political practice of publicizing accusations of disloyalty or subversion with insufficient regard to evidence and the use of methods of investigation and accusation regarded as unfair in order to suppress opposition. In simpler terms, it is an unconstitutional witch hunt against anyone with left-wing sympathies or ties. Now, it's post-World War II. Russia is now once again the enemy. The threat of communism infiltrating and demoralizing our democracy through left-wing propaganda, unions, and entertainment via Hollywood, McCarthyism was the answer to that problem. This created the House Un-American Activities Committee, whose sole job was to uncover and prosecute communist sympathizers and expose plots to undermine American values. As a result, this created what was known as the Blacklist and the so-called Hollywood 10. The Hollywood 10 were comprised of actors, screenwriters, and directors who appeared before the Congressional Committee under subpoena in October of 1947. Side note, just to show you how quickly mania can spread, even without the help of social media, World War II ended in September of 1945. So in just 2 years and 1 month, we go from We Are the World to having unconstitutional congressional hearings about things that just don't exist. The 10 refused to answer questions, which was their right to do so, especially since their arrests and subpoenas were illegal anyway, and subsequently were found in contempt of Congress and were sentenced to 6 months to 1 year in prison. And they did nothing illegal. Everyone everywhere in the U.S. was seeing red. Neighbors who have lived together on the same street for years, their kids went to the same schools, were now branded as traitors and were subjected to public persecution and ridicule. Is that starting to sound a little familiar to y'all out there? And speaking of World War II, during the war, they tried to cancel General George S. Patton, arguably one of the greatest U.S. generals in our history, for slapping an enlisted man who he believed was a coward. Now, if you don't remember your history, it was the offensive push of Patton's Third Army that changed the course of the war and helped lead to the Allied victory in Europe. So, in the middle of the Second World War, as they're planning for D-Day, they are ready and willing to sacrifice their greatest tactician to the sidelines over something that fathers across America were doing to their own children, and it was completely acceptable. I mean, hell, if you went to Catholic school, you were either getting the yardstick or the paddle. And I think one of the reasons for such a polarizing response to the incident was because during the First World War, what is now known as post-traumatic stress disorder was originally called shell shock. And for the Second World War, it was changed to battle fatigue. And here is a really good example of why words matter. When you hear shell shock, it's short, abrasive, honest, and it's direct. When you hear battle fatigue, it's soft, gentle, and doesn't really properly express the severity of the individual's situation. It would be changed 2 more times by the end of the Vietnam War. By the Korean War, it was already changed to operational exhaustion, and then by the end of Vietnam, it was changed to what is now known as PTSD. George Carlin does an excellent bit on soft language. The YouTube link is in the show notes. Please do check that out. The very idea of cancel culture actually goes back further than that. Around the 5th century BC, Athens, the originators of democracy, were practicing ostracism, which basically undesirables were exiled by popular vote. So once a year, the citizens in council will meet to see who needed to go. They would etch a name onto a broken piece of pottery, the names would be tallied, and whoever had the most votes was banished from the city for a period of 10 years under the penalty of death. And for those of you that don't know what under penalty of death means if they show that ass in Athens before 10 years is up, off with their heads. Now, what was really interesting is that this was not seen as a punishment, but more so as a way to pacify the masses and also basically humble those who, in modern terms, were feeling on themselves a bit too much. Now, as I said at the start of this episode, not everything that is said that upsets you has to be met with such extreme measures. You know, someone posts a picture online of them pretending to piss on the Alamo, or someone posts a tone-deaf and uneducated opinion, does not mean that that person deserves to die, or should be pushed to the brink to commit suicide, or have their lives completely decimated. There have been many studies done on the effects of isolation on humans, and I'm not just talking about solitary confinement. Just being an outcast, or thinking differently from the collective, or even just being a victim of circumstance, i.e. your family is broke, can be incredibly damaging for people, especially young people. Now, admittedly, I was having a little difficulty putting this next section into words, so what I did was I did what most people would do. I consulted with an expert in these matters. So I want to play for you now the interview I had with Dr. Phillof Shite, who is the head of Behavioral Analytics and Psychology at BSU. Greetings and salutations, my fellow humans. It is the Modern Day Sage here, and I'm supposed to be sitting here with Dr. Phillof Shite, head of Behavioral Analytics and Psychology here at BSU, but he seems to have forgotten that I am in his waiting... Wait. Where the fuck is he? Doc! Doc! Excuse me, but where are you going? We're supposed to have an interview today.
That was today?
Yes, I made the appointment for it.
Must have slipped my mind.
Okay, well, I'm here. If you can give me just a few minutes of your time, I'll make this as quick as I can.
Oh, goody.
Love the enthusiasm, Doc. So, I wanted to get your thoughts on the state of cancel culture and cyberbullying and how it's affecting young people.
Life's not fair, is it?
No, it isn't. You maybe take this a bit more seriously, Doc. This is a very serious topic we're addressing here.
Ooh, I quiver with fear.
Fucking really, Doc?
Temper.
You're right. I apologize. But let's focus. This is becoming a very serious problem these days. Wouldn't you agree?
You have no idea.
That's right. That's why I'm trying to ask you questions so I can get an idea.
Oops.
Right. Anyway, do you think that the victims of cancel culture and cyberbullying deserve the kind of treatment they get?
I don't think you really deserve this.
Okay, good. Would your colleagues agree as well?
I'm surrounded by idiots.
Wow, you seem to think pretty highly of yourself, don't you, Doc?
Precisely.
Okay, let's move on.
There's a good lad.
Don't condescend, Doc. I thought you sounded excited when I called you to set the appointment.
Well, forgive me for not leaping for joy. I'm bad back, you know.
Okay, well, do you have any advice maybe for young people who may be feeling down and depressed about what's being thrown at them?
You know, a sort of father-son thing.
Okay, and if they don't have a father?
Run away and never return.
Alright, that's it. Guess what, Doc?
I despise guessing games.
Wow, you are a really big piece of shit. Doc, I don't know why I bothered coming to you at all. God, what does this make me?
A monkey's uncle.
Fuck yourself. I feel sorry for your patience. And I hope that the next person who tries to learn something from you, that you try to act more like a gentleman.
Oh, I shall practice my courtesy.
And there you have it, folks. A prime example of mental health care in America. And people are wondering why we are in the place that we are. Oh, boy. God help us all. Well, safe to say that didn't go like I hoped. Okay, well, when you're stuck, talk about what you do know. A lot of what I talk about comes from personal experience. I did not have the best childhood growing up. I was bullied and ostracized by my classmates pretty much all through grade school, even with a school change and some of high school. I've been ridiculed, jumped, beat up, knocked out, choked out, told I was worthless every day. When I got jumped the next day in class, one of the kids in the grades ahead of us came into the classroom, congratulated, thanked, and shook the hand of the kid that jumped me and said he was proud of him and that I deserved it. I even had this one asshole try to tell me that because my family was broke, and by broke I mean I was raised by a single mother working 2 to 3 jobs just so we had a roof and food, that I did not deserve to wear the Tommy Hilfiger jacket she and my grandmother got for me for Christmas that year. Oh, by the way, this was at Catholic schools, so anyone tries to tell you that church and kindness go hand in hand, they're full of shit. You can go to church all the livelong day and still be a piece of shit human being. I've seen it, in childhood and in adult life. And something that just absolutely crushes my hopes for humanity is the pitiful lack of federal law on the books regarding cyberbullying. There are no laws currently on the books at the federal level, so the states are left to try and figure out for themselves, which leaves the victim with very few options for protection and justice. A clear example of cancel culture and cyberbullying walking hand in hand, for me at least, is is Morbid and the Alyssa Lamb case. For those who don't know, a little backstory. In 2013, Alyssa Lamb, a Canadian student who was reported missing after not returning from her trip to the Hotel Cecil, and her family had not heard from her in some time. Investigators released a chilling video from the elevator security cameras of Lamb's moments before her disappearance. From here, so-called internet sleuths began digging online to try and solve the mystery of what happened to Lamb. They focused their crosshairs on Morbid, aka Pablo Vergara, who was a Mexican death metal musician for two reasons that they believed to be quote-unquote evidence. One, his YouTube channel showcased his fascination with death. He is a death metal musician after all, and his music videos even had scenes of him performing in front of pictures of Ted Bundy and Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. And one song was even about drowning and depicted him chasing down a young woman. There was also, and two, there was a selfie video of him at this Hotel Cecil, which is what really set the quote-unquote sleuths off. They accused him of murder and were relentless in their persecution of him, trying to pressure him into confessing. One little issue with their theory, though, that selfie video that had people so convinced he was guilty, that was filmed and posted in 2012. Almost a full year before Lamb was even in the country. The FBI and LAPD eventually cleared him as a suspect and said he never was in the first place, as he had no connections to Lamb. Even after he was officially cleared, do you think he received any kind of apology from the sleuths and the treatment he was receiving? Nope. Has anyone who has been canceled or canceled wrongly been forgiven or received an apology as emphatically as they were shunned? Nope. So, here's my sage advice. If an apology without change is a manipulation, then change without forgiveness is an empty promise. The original point of canceling someone is to hold them accountable for their actions and to prompt needed change in their thoughts and behavior, not to literally badger them to death. Change is hard. It's uncomfortable. If you are challenging someone to change themselves, and they take the time and effort to do so, genuinely, but then even after the change, you don't forgive them, then what did they just put themselves through all of that for? What has been accomplished? I mean, sure, you may feel better about yourself for standing up for others or your beliefs, and that's all well and good, but is it really even about you? Is this actually something that you need to get involved with? In the case of Morbid, the quote-unquote sleuths didn't have all the facts in front of them. It was assumptions and absolutely no due process. This is why cancel culture as it is today with social media is so damaging and oftentimes reckless. You don't know these people personally. You have no idea what the chain of events are that led this person to this behavior. You do not have all the facts. Instead of trying to destroy lives, try being helpful. Offer something more than death threats and bile to promote change. Offer a path, something for those you want to change to work towards, like forgiveness, a future that's brighter than it is right now. We are all broken people to some degree or another. And I think it's high time we start cutting people a little slack and letting certain things go, because life is hard enough as it is without having some stranger threatening to take everything away from you, every waking moment of their lives. Do not get so wrapped up in trying to be the hero that you become the villain in someone else's life. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Blame It on the Ish. I hope you did enjoy, maybe learn something, maybe feel enlightened, maybe feel curious about something else. If your curiosity is piqued, please check out the show notes. I have some links to the places where I've gotten some of my information from, as well as suggestions for the George Carlin video. The link for that will be there. And I also recommend watching 2 movies that will help paint a pretty good picture on some of the things that I was talking about. And one of those is Patton, starring George C. Scott. He does a phenomenal job on it. It's a really good biographical on Patton, written through his and General Bradley, who was his number 2, and then his boss during the European push in France towards like Bastogne and all of that time frame. I also would like to suggest the movie Trumbo, starring Bryan Cranston. He does a phenomenal job in it, and it really is a, again, biographical style of what he went through. He was on the blacklist. He was one of the Hollywood 10, and it really covers very well what that was like for him and the industry as well as a whole. So definitely check that out. I will see you next time. Be kind, be safe, and enjoy life.